Hi, my name is Charlie. I'm going to go through the InterNACHI class. I'm going to do this live and hopefully it'll help you when you go through it. So the class that we're going to do now is how to inspect the attic insulation and ventilation course. I'm going to skip some of the sections. Some of them are repetitive for each one of the classes that you take. Such as on this one, we're going to skip over the beginning and how to progress through the course and student verification and all the different links that you can get to. Now, those are important. You do need to, I shouldn't say need to, but you should want to go in there and check out the extra videos, get the PDFs. Sometimes when we have different avenues of absorption, it just makes things easier. So I just remember something way back from high school. Read it, write it, say it, do it, and basically use all the senses you can, and that's how you're going to remember it. So we're going to do a little bit of reading. I'm going to jump off a couple times or get off track, but I'm going to try and stay focused on this as much as possible. So here they're giving us our welcome at the end. And the final exam, they're going to have a 60-question test, and your information is going to be recorded onto the NACHI site, and if you forget your password, you can get that stuff. All right, so let's move on to the objectives, and the objectives are going to be our biggest spot here. So let me get switched here. I don't think I made it just as of yet. Sorry. Objectives, good. I'm there. All right. So the purpose of this course is to provide accurate, useful information. That's good. So this list here is basically, it's always a good idea to either print this, write it down, double check it. These are the things we're expected to remember by the time we're done with the course. So we want to be able to recognize the different types of insulation, get the rough R values for the different types of insulation. We should have a good understanding of how we move heat. In this case, we're talking about how we move heat through air, water. Now, I guess they're kind of merging all that together. So the movement of air, water, and heat, different types of moisture controls. They're going to talk about roof, attic, and crawl space ventilation. There are going to be some numbers you're going to want to remember in that. We'll get to it when we get to it. Vapor diffusion retarders, natural ventilation, whole house ventilation, and spot ventilation. Different methods of air sealing and different types of air barriers. You should understand the difference between an air barrier and a vapor retarder. Some people refer to those as vapor barriers as well. We're going to talk about windows, doors, floors, walls, ceilings, bathrooms, ventilation, safety glass and windows as part of the interior, garage door inspections, egress steps, handrails. What else we got here? Illumination, which is our lights, basically. And when I say lights, I mean windows. Emergency escape and rescue openings, and much more. The focus on this course is going to be 3 major factors in a healthy home, which is good insulation, ventilation, and moisture control. The course refers to the general inspection process and the InterNACHI residential standards. The student should demonstrate an understanding comprehensive of the course by reading and studying materials. Taking the course in its entirety. After successful completion, the student should be able to perform an inspection on the attic. So we hope. Okay. So we hope. Let's go to the next section. Inspector safety. I'm going to go a little bit quick on this one. I do believe they go over everything on there. And for somebody who's been doing this for quite a long time, I have to confess that I was never very good at these requirements, or I shouldn't say requirements, these suggestions that they put on here for keeping yourself safe. And after 27 years, I got to say that there's many times that I actually wish I did heed these warnings. And I'm going to do what I can to encourage you. The cost of everything is cheap, and it's definitely worth every single penny that you put into it. So the first one is coveralls and overalls, especially if you're going to be going into crawl spaces or attics. Keeping all that stuff off your clothes is vitally important, especially in crawl spaces. You don't know, you don't always see, I should say, if an area is wet or not when you get into the crawl space. So if you get something that's waterproof, that would actually be better. And the problem with the crawl spaces is if it's wet, you don't know if it's rainwater or if the water is actually stagnant or it's human waste from a leak in the plumbing system. And it doesn't take much, when it comes to stagnant water or human waste to get into a small cut in your skin and start getting a staph infection. And that gets real serious, especially the older you get and if you have any other health issues. So keeping your clothes clean, keeping yourself dry and stuff is fantastic idea. Shoe covers, booties, to me that shows professionalism. It shows that you care about the seller's home. And I hear some inspectors say, well, I don't care about the seller's home. They're not my client. The buyer is my client. I always like to treat the home with respect, and I can't encourage you enough to do the same. Because if you make that seller angry, then they're actually going to be harming your client. So your client's going to want to negotiate with that seller. And if you ever tried to negotiate with somebody who's angry, it's not an easy thing to do. So you are harming your client. Gloves, especially now, when this video is done, it's a COVID time. But either way, when you're in the basement or you're touching something, it's good to have a nice sturdy pair of gloves. Knee pads, that's one of those items that I wish I wore more when I went into the crawl spaces. My knees hurt, and I put them on now, but if I started doing it 27 years ago when they didn't hurt, they'd probably be a lot stronger today, just a guess. Goggles, I've gotten fiberglass in my eyes. I've gotten sawdust in my eyes. It hurts. It burns. I had to go to the hospital twice to get things cleaned out. Never wore glasses in my life until like the last 10 years. And that does seem to help. But I think they actually have prescription safety glasses as well. So you just get that little bit on the end. Respirators, that's another one I wish I would have done for many, many years. And whenever you're up there in those attics or in the crawl spaces, you don't know what's floating around in the air. And that stuff does get into the lungs. And obviously you just don't want that in your lungs. Let's go here. These are some of the tools we're going to need. Flashlights, can't encourage that enough. Get yourself a good one and always have a backup. Tape measures. If you're going to get into measuring the installation, there's nothing that says we have to, but I think it's a good service. So if you want to see how many inches are there and compare it to other spots, that's great. Levels, plumb bobs, all right, can be used to check the slopes of driveways and so forth. I actually got an app on my phone that does a lot of that stuff. And I don't go too much into it, but I've seen people, roll balls and check for levelness. Screwdrivers, that I do believe in, awls and probes. Mostly whenever we get into, someplace where I think there might be wood rot or termite damage or something, then I'm going to kind of poke away at it to see if anything happens. Magnets, yeah, definitely. You don't think you need a magnet, and I'm talking about the ones on a stick, and get those little hockey puck ones because those can be bent around corners and they're pretty powerful. But when you drop something or you lose something and you need to get that back up, whether it's a screw or another tool or something, you're going to be so happy you have that magnet, and just to keep it in your tool pouch doesn't take up a lot of room. Moisture meter, there's nothing in the standards to say we have to check for moist areas, but for us, in our company, and we actually use a next one in there as well, thermal imaging cameras, and we have it on every inspection. We pull it out on every inspection, and if we do see a cold spot, then we take the moisture meter and we either prove or disprove that it's water going on there. So what's nice is when it's wet and it's evaporating, we're going to be, basically the water absorbs heat to evaporate. we're going to see that as cold on the thermal imager, and then we can go ahead and check it for the moisture reading. And to me, it's what we should be doing on our job. But there is nothing in the standards that mandates that you have to do this. So if you want to build up to these things, you go right ahead. But I can't encourage enough to make that one of your top stuff. Binoculars, we do keep a pair. I got to be honest, I never really pull them out. My glasses are pretty decent, and we got a good zoom for the cameras. Ladders, definitely. We like the little giant brands. Gorilla, Costco, they also make some good ones. Tiger Paw shoes, fantastic. I do have a pair for shingles, and I got a pair for metal roofs when I get up there. The metal roofs get ridiculously slippery when that happens. Ladder tie-offs, can't stress that enough. All right, I don't care if it's a bungee cord, just something. You won't believe me until it happens to you, and I didn't believe anyone else until it happened to me. But you get up on a roof, and then a gust of wind comes and blows your ladder down, and you're just up there, and you don't know what you got to do until somebody finds a ladder and puts it back up for you. Big pain in the butt. Personal tie-offs, especially if you're going to be hiring people, you should be wearing some sort of safety equipment where it comes through it. Truthfully, I don't. Okay, but it's my business, and everybody with us is a subcontractor, so they make their own choices. And it's difficult to tie off to anything on the roof anyway, but it's still a good idea. I can't encourage you not to. The road cones, I see that with our phone companies, our cable company trucks, our gas trucks in the area. They're putting them out there all the time. When I was driving for the fire department, we would have to put them out there all the time as well. I'm sure it's some sort of an insurance thing. And you know what? If anything, especially if you're going to letter your vehicle, if anything, it's going to bring attention to your vehicle. And that's not a bad thing. Use it as a marketing tool. And these danger signs, and I kind of like this little ladder and the sign that they put on there. Again, just warning people, let them know you're there, keep away from my stuff. I'm a big advocate for putting your ladders, only bring them out when you're going to use them and put them away right away when you don't. You're going to be surprised, and I've heard too many horror stories about people going up on ladders. And I'm talking about clients, sometimes kids, sometimes you get elderly people that really shouldn't be walking on ladders anymore. And then they end up falling and getting hurt. And once somebody gets hurt, then the fingers start pointing. And that's what we want to avoid. All right. I'm going to skip over the... Actually, I'm not. Let's open this up in another tab. All right. So attics. So when we talk about the SOP, we're standards of practice. The one thing that NACHI does well is they'll tell you what you have to do, what you're supposed to look at, and they'll also give you some things that you don't have to do. They never stop you in doing those items, but they say you just don't have to. It's not expected. And it's when you share that with your client, it's good to make sure that they don't expect you to do it as well. So the inspector shall inspect. Inspect means to look at, all right, and make your determination. It doesn't mean to do any sort of exhaustive testing, tools, equipment, anything else. It means we have to look at it, plain and simple. And anytime we look at something, we should always document that we looked at it as well. Most of the report writing systems will have a simple button, and it says inspected or not inspected or not present, and go from there. So the installation in unfinished spaces, including attics, crawl spaces, and foundation areas. Ventilation in unfinished areas, including attics, crawl spaces, and foundations. Mechanical exhaust systems, such as kitchen exhaust, bathroom exhaust, and dryer vent exhaust is what they're talking about here. So they want us to look at all those different items on doing it. If you got installation open in the wall cavities as well, that's also included in this. Anytime you can see the installation, they're expecting you to expect it or look at it. All right. Most of the time, the wall stuff is going to be covered with drywall, so we can't see it. and you're only going to be able to see the top layer of the insulation. You don't know what's going to be underneath it. So, we have our limitations. And again, making sure that your client understands those limitations, vitally important. I can't stress it enough. Describe means we have to put it in writing. We have to put it in our report. So the type of insulation you observed and the approximate depth of insulation observed at the unfinished attic floor area or roof structure. Okay. So I'm trying to think, we work off the state of Illinois standards in here. We don't have to give the approximate average depth. But if you're going to be claiming that you're going to be doing your inspection to the NACHI standards, then you are going to have to do that, obviously. Shall report as in need of correction the general absence of insulation or ventilation in unfinished areas. A lot of people don't realize we're in the opinion business, and people are paying us to give us their opinion on stuff, all right? So it doesn't really matter, how much insulation it is and that's in there. And don't hate me for just what I just said, all right? You give your opinion. If you think it doesn't have enough insulation and it should be more, and you want to base your opinion on codes or anything else, you go right ahead. There's nothing wrong with that at all. All this is saying is that if it's missing, all right, if it's absent, and that's the key word there, is the general absence of insulation or ventilation in unfinished areas. Everything else is going to be your opinion. So the inspector is not required to enter the attic or finish or readily accessible where entry could cause damage to the inspector's opinion or pose a safety hazard. I thought I said we had to describe how we inspected it, but I didn't see that. All right. Enter the attic. We don't have to do that. We don't have to touch, move, or disturb insulation or vapor retarders. We don't want to break anything or damage the surface finish, weather seal around access panels or covers. And they're talking about paint. All right. So, again, we don't want to make the sellers or the owners of the home upset. So the best thing to do is get permission as much as you can. If you can get the agents to call the other agents, to call the sellers, to come back to the chain of command or the grapevine and come back to you and give you permission, that's always a good thing. So we don't have to identify the composition or the R value of the insulation materials. It doesn't mean you can't. It just means you don't have to. We don't have to activate thermostatically operated fans, all right? So we do have fans in attics that are on humidistats and fans that are on thermostats, and sometimes they're on both. So we don't have to heat it up, to get them going, or we don't have to create moisture to get them going, but we should still inspect them. And if there's another way to turn them on and get them going using normal operating controls, that's not a bad thing. We don't have to determine the types of materials used in installation of wrapping of pipes, ducts, jackets, boilers, or any sort of wiring. And mostly this is going after like asbestos. A lot of those wraps were wrapped in a type of asbestos. And really the only way to tell if something's asbestos, you'll see items, you can make good guesses at it, but the only way to really tell is to send it off to a lab. And then determine the adequacy of ventilation. It's a difficult one, It all depends on how many people are living there, how they live there, the type of heat, the humidity that they add to the building. So as different humans live in different buildings, you get different humidity issues that happen. It's hard to predict what anything is going to be like when you get back to the actual home, when the new people move in. So let's see what our next one is. If your client is buying a house or building a new one, they might actually check the insulation, make sure it's properly installed. They want to know the type, the thickness, the R value. There's nothing wrong with learning as much as you can. I can encourage you to learn as many codes, especially the new energy code, and see what the R values are. Different types of insulation have different R values per inch. For a good one to remember is standard fiberglass bat is usually around an R3, maybe an R4, but we go by R3 per inch. And the blown in stuff, same thing. But then once you get to the dense pack items, those R values go up higher. It's a good idea to get the home airtight, absolutely. It's the drafts that really create the problems. And as we go through this, I'm not sure if they use the term bypass, but I want you to remember bypass, all right? And bypass is any time that air is flowing through a ceiling, a wall, any sort of cavity where it's not supposed to be going through. And those are going to be one of the number one things we look for. And by the way, it makes it real easy when you're using a thermal imaging camera, and you can use it for up in the attic or down below, all right? You are required to inspect the insulation on unfinished spaces. We said that already, including the attic. You are not required to enter the attic or unfinished where you think you can get hurt, trapped, cause any sort of damage. You should try to enter the crawl space and check the ground covering insulation and ventilation. Check for problems that may be caused by ventilation insulation. Check. That's good advice. Tell your client about the absence or lack of ventilation. That's mandatory. We have to do that. You are not required to identify the exact composition or the exact R value of the insulation. You're not required to move it. Vapor diffusers, retarders. You are required to inspect the ventilation of the attic spaces, true, and check the mechanical systems, but we don't have to determine the adequacy of ventilation. So, and we're going to talk about that when we get to it, but again, you're going to be in that attic from no more than a half hour, probably only going to be about 15 minutes or 10 minutes. And that's all you're going to see of it. And you don't know how their life, they're being the clients that are going to move into the home, you don't know how their life is going to be changing, how that house is being used. So all we could do is tell the condition of the home based on the history, what's there. So we're going to be looking for signs of water leakage, stains, condensations, high heat, scorching marks, things like that. But once we get to it, we'll see some pictures. I'm sure we'll talk about it more. While performing, let's see, you are required to open and close a representative number of doors and windows. True. Representative numbers means one per room. That's a minimum. I'm going to encourage you to open as many as you can. Most inspectors find it easy to operate every interior door, but too time-consuming to open many of the windows. Report to your client any windows that are fogged or display evidence of a broken seal. All right, so it's our policy. And again, how you run your business is your business. The minimum, one per room. All right. We try to operate every single one. Windows are expensive nowadays, especially in, our neck of the woods. I know you can get cheaper windows, but our clients usually go for the $500,000 windows. And when they get rotted because they're either installed wrong or they don't operate wrong, or our client goes to open a window and it doesn't open, then they tend to get angry and the fingers start pointing. And, my whole goal and what we talk about is don't get them pointing at us. So we try to tell them as many things as we can. While performing the inspection inside the house, check for walls, ceilings, stairs, steps, railings. You are not required to discover firewall compromises. We'll talk about that when we get to it. If there's a garage, inspect the door and the opener if it's installed. If you're not required to check, you are not required to check wallpaper, paint, window treatment, finish treatments, cosmetics as part of a typical home inspection. You need not check the fastening of countertops, cabinets, sinks, and fixtures. So make sure your client understands that, all right? And talk to them about it. And, for me, when we explain to them that we're not going to be looking for cosmetic stuff, but if they, and I'm talking about like paint drips or scratches in the paints, that we're not going to really be commenting and looking on. But if my client brings it up, I'm going to do it or put it in the report. Anything that your client ever brings up, you should be putting in the report. However, I am going to be looking at all the walls and ceilings with, usually I take a flashlight and I'll shine it on the side. And it's an old painter's trick. You get a bright flashlight on the side and it lights up the walls. And you're going to be able to see where every screw, every patching has been, and especially when it's been patched in multiple areas. So around windows, doors, exterior walls at the ceiling level, those are big areas where we look for the movement or look for past repairs. And if it looks like that it's been done more than once, I'm going to get a little aggressive. I'm going to get the moisture meter on there. We're going to document that it's been there and give my clients a heads up that it's going to be there. Now, here where it says you need not check the fastening of countertops, cabinets, sink tops, fixtures, it's true. It's not in the SOP. You don't have to do it. I'd like to encourage you to. It takes just a little bit of pressure lifting up on the countertops, but you're going to be surprised on how many times these things are loose. And it doesn't take much. If somebody's not expecting it, they're coming around a corner to give it a yank, to hold themselves up, and then all of a sudden the countertop or cabinet lets loose. Somebody gets hurt. Again, I'm always panicky about those fingers coming out. You don't have to move furniture, personal stored items, or any carpeting in order to inspect the floor structure. And you do not have to move any drop ceiling tiles. Okay. And now the furniture, we really try to avoid moving furniture. If I do move it, just to get to a window or an outlet or something like that, and especially if there's carpeting there, I try to put that piece of furniture exactly where it was. My whole goal is, again, not to upset the clients. Sometimes I will go and look in the corner of carpeting. Again, we don't have to. Drop ceilings, sometimes they're a pain in the butt. I try to find the loose ones so they go up and come down there, but I do want to move a few of them. I want to get up there and peek, and especially get my head above that ceiling tile level, with the flashlight so I could see around as much as I can. But that's it. And then the last one in the kitchen, you have to check the fixtures, water supply, drain pipes. However, you're not required to inspect any household appliances, including operating ovens, microwaves, and other things like that. So our company, we do it. And again, you don't have to do it. There's nothing that says you do. But, our main focus is why people should choose us. So we try to look at more items than what's on the list, and our standards, I guess, are what we look at are going to be different than most people. But you don't have to look at appliances. Again, my advice would be to make sure that your clients understand that fully, and then go from there. All right, we're going to do this quiz, and then we'll end this video. So it looks like we have here 4 questions, and I think you have to get 80%, so we can't get any wrong on this. So you are required to inspect the installation in unfinished spaces, including the attic. That's true. We have to inspect it, and that's our key word right there, inspect. You are required to inform your client about the absence, okay, or lack of insulation in areas of the house. They threw in this lack, and I don't remember that. But right now I think I'm going to mark it true, and we may have to do it again. You are required to check the mechanical ventilation systems by activating thermostatically operated fans. That one I remember we don't have to do. All right. If there's a switch to turn them on, that's fine. But the key word here is thermostats. Same thing. Humidifiers, humidistats. We don't have to get those up to make them work. You are required to move a representative number of drop-in ceiling tiles. Well, we're lucky. That was one of the last ones that we just read. We don't have to move any of them if we don't want to. But again, I'd like to encourage you. So let's see how we did. And good. We got 100%. All right. I'm going to stop this, and you can go ahead and get your quiz taken so you can get up to date, and then we'll move on to the next section.